These people are not your friends. They are trying to sell you something. You're a shareholder. You're on the opposite side of the table from them. Even if they own shares, their management, they work for you. They're not your friends. And you must be skeptical about everything they tell you. Every PowerPoint, every website, every press release, you need to read it. If not with an antagonistic or hostile mindset, then at least with a skeptical mindset. Ask yourselves, is this true? Why should I believe this is true?
This is Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Little by Little. I'm very, very excited to have Lobo Tiggre with us today. He is the proprietor and author of The Independent Speculator. As I was mentioning, it's hard for me to get the international speculator out of my mind as I've been following you for such a long time, which leads me to my first question. We'll just jump right into it. And this is a question that sitting down with you with a bottle of wine would be the proper way to ask this question. And that is that you spent 14, 15 years learning from Doug Casey. To me, I don't know that I've ever met someone more insightful, more interesting. I think that Dos Equis had it wrong when they said the most interesting man. Doug Casey had that buttoned up years before those commercials came out. So if you would, could you share a story or an experience from those years that stand out, or something that shaped your approach from all that time with Doug that maybe even haven't even told before that our listeners would love to hear? Because he is a cool guy.
He is the international man, and he certainly taught me a lot. So a quick sideways point, right off the bat, Doug introduced me to Rick Rule, and Rick was very generous with his time. He spent a day teaching me about the oil patch. I mean, I don't know what Rick Rule's hourly rate would be if he charged for consulting or education, but both of them are my prime mentors in this space, and I owe them both huge debts, intellectual debt, for which I'm very grateful. But sure, Doug's stories are fun. The first thing that comes to mind is, the mighty Doug Casey. You might think that somebody so famous in this space would be arrogant, and he's not. He's quite the puppy. And there are arrogant personalities in this space. There's people that just blow hards and you can't shut them up. You have to shut the microphone off or something. And Doug is just so relaxed. He's so easygoing. If you meet him at a conference, you can just walk up to him and talk to him like a human being, and he will answer. He doesn't have patience for stupidity. So if you say something really dumb, you're not going to get real far. But he'll talk to anybody. And to his stories, I remember once we were in Ecuador going to see some rocks, and we were flying. The company we were going to see wanted to show off their relations with the government and, how solid they were. So they arranged for this military chopper to take us up into the mountains, where it would have taken days on burroback or something to get there. So there's this huge, giant Soviet relic, twin props on either end. It was so old, there were holes in it. I literally put my camera in a hole in the bottom of the fuselage and was filming the jungle as we flew over it. But so not very fuel efficient. We stopped at an airport halfway there to refuel. And because of the peculiar design of this thing, they didn't have a fuel hose that could refuel this helicopter. The nozzle was too high. So all these people were scurrying around. And the point for Doug is, these people don't know who Doug Casey is. They just know that he's somebody important enough that the military is flying him around. So the airport emptied of people. They all came out. There are dozens of people scurrying around, not to waste a moment of Mr. Casey's time, whoever the hell he is, right? And so Doug's sitting there, tapping his watch. No, he's talking to the pilot. Turns out that they had some bush flying experience in Africa in common or something, and then they discovered they both like cigars. So, of course, they didn't light up a stogie right next to the chopper, but they went to the side of the airfield, right? And Doug's just so relaxed. And he's just, it helped me understand the concept of drop dead money. Like for me, as the cub reporter on the beat, it was really important to get this story and get my deadline meet. Whereas if all of Casey research had dried up and blown away, it's not like Doug would have had to work another day in his life, right? So anyway, the point of the story is just, it's one thing to be extremely knowledgeable and experienced and insightful. It's another thing to be relaxed and be humble maybe isn't the right word for Doug. But this is relevant. This is important. As an investor, as a speculator, you have to be able to admit that you might be wrong. You can't be so full of yourself or your theories or your grand explanation for everything in the market and why gold's got to go to the moon tomorrow or whatever it is, right? That sets you up for unhappy investment outcomes. And Doug had that sort of, again, humility isn't quite the right word, but an ability to laugh at yourself and relax and go with the flow and understand that you can be wrong. And I do think this was a substantial contributing factor to his success as a speculator.
Yeah, that's interesting. He certainly carries that vibe. I've had the good fortune of, as you say, speaking to him at conferences. And since we are throwing around accolades and thanking our mentors, I too would say that Rick Rule is as close to a mentor as anyone I've ever had. I've had the good fortune of working very closely with him for almost 25 years. He's done probably more for my career than anyone. So if you're listening, Rick, thank you very much. I too owe you a very large debt of gratitude. And I think success is found in these industries or in any industry by learning from people who have paved the way with success and humility. And I would say both Rick and Doug exemplify that. Well, thank you for sharing. Let's just ask a basic question, Lobo. How do you define speculation and how does it differ from investing, traditional investing anyway? And is there an overlap between the two or are they fundamentally different approaches?
They're substantially different approaches. And I think Rick would be the one who would say that investing is deploying capital for expected return. And I'm not sure what his definition of speculation is, but my riff on that is speculation is deploying capital for hypothetical return. Like, you understand that this isn't like a shoe factory that's growing at this rate and it's highly likely to continue that rate. People are not going to stop needing shoes, that sort of thing. When you're speculating, you're thinking ahead. You don't know the future, but you're making some kind of projection. And you're going there and trying to stand there with the money basket if you're right. So it's hypothetical. Now, it's not, the difference though is that it's not just gambling. Gambling is just, another Rick Ruleism, got a hunch, bet a bunch. Right? That's not disciplined speculation. That's not what Rick and Doug taught me. Another Doug Caseyism is that one of the most reliable bases of speculation in the entire financial world is that you can count on governments to do the wrong thing. In any given situation, inflation or trade war or whatever it is, you can almost count that the government is going to do the exact opposite of whatever the right thing for the people, for the economy would be in that circumstance. And that's investable, or that's speculable. Is that a word? That's an investment you can speculate on, right? So, we have an economic problem and distortions. The right thing would be to let the market liquidate the errors, have people, stop spending, save, and then accumulate capital to grow on a solid basis. Governments are never going to do that. The track record of at least the latter half of the 20th century and the beginning of this one is that they'll try to paper it over. They're going to throw money on it. And therefore, inflation is a highly predictable outcome. The timing that is notoriously difficult. But look at the history of this century that we've had. Everything that Doug Casey has said, except for the Greater Depression, has come true with a vengeance. And he's made money on that. I've made money on that. Our readers have made money on that. So speculation is, it's not just tossing the dice or gambling on anything that might happen. It's looking at trends, making a projection, and making the best, most disciplined guess you can. And by the way, doing everything you can to put the odds in your favor. It's, due diligence is really not optional, I think, for successful speculation. It can't just be, I've got this theory, the BRICS countries are going to move away from the dollar. Well, yeah, but what does that, other than bullion itself, how do I speculate on that? There's a minefield out there if you don't do your diligence properly.
Well, and it's very obvious that you've done your diligence both at the International Speculator and the Independent. I see your returns in both cases have been spectacular. So I guess we could call it calculated speculation. We could call it speculation with an awful lot of due diligence, and that's admirable. And certainly those tips, those secrets, those lessons have followed you well, even on your own journey. So congratulations on that. Let's shift gears just a little bit, but stay on the topic of speculation. You can probably guess where I'm going with this. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has stated that Bitcoin competes more with gold than with the US dollar. What are your thoughts on speculation in cryptocurrencies these days, as it seems to be the topic du jour?
Okay, I'll go there. But first, let me say, when Powell said that, I didn't quite fall out of my chair or anything, but I did laugh out loud. It was ridiculous. It wasn't just that he said that cryptos were like gold, but yeah, the nuance that these are speculative assets. It's talk to anybody in your audience that owns gold or silver. They're not stacking as a speculation because they think the price is going up. If you're a trader, you're not going to pay the fabrication fee for coins. That would be silly. You can buy an ETF and trade. You can speculate. Use the paper version. So people who own gold and silver, they're not speculators. They're savers. They understand that if the brown stuff hits the fan, whatever else happens to these funny little pieces of paper we call money, or digital ghosts of those now, we don't even bother with the paper. That's something of physical value that you can hold in your hand and is highly liquid, is a useful thing. And I'm sorry to proselytize. Your audience doesn't need to use it. I've experienced it in my life, my personal life. I've had to rely, post massive inflation on monetary metals to feed my family. This has actually happened to me. So I feel very strongly about this. But anyway, so, and Powell, people like to diss him and knock him and so on and say, oh, he's an idiot or whatever. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's a liar. I think his profession is to steer the great ship of state, expectations being so important and so on. His job is he thinks, to massage expectations to guide, the economy where he thinks it should go. Nowhere in that description does it say tell the truth. So I'm not even trying to be insulting. I'm trying to be accurate. I think that his job has nothing to do with telling the truth whatsoever. It has to do with saying whatever he thinks he needs to say to keep people calm, to keep them spending, to keep consumer confidence up, and guide the economy as they think it should. So I just thought the thing was really quite ridiculous and no accident. I think that's part of the messaging. It's part of the spin, part of the propaganda. Anyway, to answer your question, it's difficult to say with a straight face with Bitcoin circa 100,000 that it's all stupid, it's all imaginary, you're an idiot if you ever invest in Bitcoin. With all due respect to a very famous fellow Puerto Rican down here, it's like every time Bitcoin goes up, he predicts it's going down and it keeps going up. So I'm not going there. What I have always said is that it's a mistake for gold bugs to focus their animosity on cryptos and Bitcoin because they feel like it's stealing gold's lunch. The real enemy here is fiat currency, and the crypto crowd has educated two whole younger generations on the meaninglessness of so-called paper money. And the word fiat was simply, not in popular circulation before the crypto phenomenon. It was something only gold bugs talked about. And now everybody talks about it. And the young people understand that these pieces of paper and their digital ghosts are actually worthless. It's only government fiat that keeps them in circulation. So I think there's actually huge synergies here. I've long described the advent of cryptocurrencies as a market response to gross mismanagement of the money business by governments. So it makes perfect sense to me. A decentralized, non-governmental form of money, I love the idea. My problem has always been the valuation. What is a Bitcoin worth? I've never been able to wrap my mind around that. And I know that my mentor, Doug Casey, has now jumped on the Bitcoin bandwagon. I'm still not ready to go there. I've never shorted it, thank goodness. Can you imagine if I had, anyway. But so my point is not that I'm hostile to cryptos or Bitcoin. I'm not, people are so religious about these things, but I'm not anti-Bitcoin. I just haven't been able to bring myself to buy it because, I mean, think about what we just talked about with speculation. I don't think of myself as a gambler. I'm not just, getting a hunch and betting a bunch. Oh, it's going higher. I never just chase momentum. I need to understand the value proposition. I'm a disciplined speculator. I'm think the market's going this way, and I'm looking for a value proposition that I can bet on delivering for me. And I just can't find that in Bitcoin and saying, oh, well, there's only ever going to be 21 million. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin, like the one ring of Sauron, is going to rule all money and it's all going to be, and that's a theoretical answer that I find unsatisfying. And so, we'll see. But, my most optimistic outlook here is I'd love to see, gold-backed cryptos in circulation. I do think this is, to the degree that the Lynn Aldens of the world who talk about, the advance of technology and how crypto is the new technological form of money, commodity money was had its day and now we're moving ahead. The gold-backed crypto solves that. You can transfer it instantaneously, like the need to carry heavy physical gold. We don't want to go around with a medieval coin purse on our belt, right? That solves that. But it also solves the fractional transfer thing. You can transfer 1 gram, you can transfer 1/10 of a gram, you can transfer 1/1,000,000th of a gram electronically. There's no limit to giving change in gold, which, by the way, is not great news for silver as a form of making change for gold as it was historically. And I do think, people call me names for saying this, but I do think this is part of why we've seen silver responding differently to various market stimuli than gold lately. I do think silver is still money. Don't hate me. Don't throw tomatoes. Well, throw them at your screen if you like, but I do still see silver as money. I do understand that it is the word for money in many languages in the world. I think it's an objective fact. If you look at these markets, you can see gold and silver behaving in different ways. Last year, silver correlated more highly with copper than gold. It's just the math, right? So it's interesting times. I'm actually very keen on the blockchain and that being wedded to monetary metals, both gold and silver. But we'll see how that works out. Long story short, at the end of the day, instead of me or Doug or the Bitcoin maxis or Donald Trump or anybody telling you what money is and should be, I think let the market determine. The market will tell us what is the most convenient, trusted, best form of money out there. And I do think that will win in the end.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. I have publicly, I do a lot of interviews with the crypto space for the exact same reason that what you said. I too have had a very hard time wrapping my head around the value proposition. You can't hold it in your hand. It's not the traditional commodity that we may be used to. But I have also felt that it's silly to be adversarial. And in many respects, for the same reasoning that you have, we see things in a complementary fashion. Perhaps the only difference is that, to your point, our clients are not buying gold and silver to become wealthy. They view it as wealth. And whereas you could argue that the thrust into cryptocurrencies, although we go into the same door for somewhat similar reasons, the distrust of the legacy system, as an example, one is going in for preservation and the other profit. I think it's interesting as a sidebar that all of these stable coins now, whether it be Tether, whether it be USDC, which is backed by Goldman Sachs, or now the new XRP, dollar-based stablecoin, all of them are about 85% backed by US Treasuries. So as they are trying to exit the legacy system in a very perverse sort of way, they are supporting it. Just kind of thought that was interesting. But your point is taken, and I agree with it almost entirely. Let's shift gears just a little bit. Sticking on President Trump in this case, since we talked about him here a little bit. I watched something with you and Jeff Clark, who I love Jeff Clark. He is one of the nicest men I've met in this industry in 35 years. And if you're watching, Jeff, you know how much I care about you, buddy. Anyways, in that discussion with Jeff and Jesse, you described Trump as an agent of change and highly unpredictable. I agree. I think most people would. So right now, as an example, the markets just for the last 2 days have been experiencing shockwaves due to rumors that President-elect Trump will impose tariffs on precious metals importing into the United States. And we've seen the exchange for physical premium go to the moon. So given this context, do you see President Trump and his policies affecting the metals and maybe even more so the mining sector?
Well, hold on. Let me consult. If we're talking about with all due respect, again, I'm not trying to be anti-Trump. I mean, I do have criticisms for Trump. There are some things that he has said and done that, sorry, dear audience, I think they're loathsome. But my point here isn't to beat up on Trump. My point here, as an investor, as a speculator, is to look at realities objectively I can and try to, I need to know what the trends are. I need to know what trends are solid enough to bet on. And, got a hunch, bet a bunch does not work for me. Hear a rumor, bet a bunch does not work for me. I need to see data. I need to see a trend, not just another Rick Ruleism. Don't confuse the inevitable with the imminent, right? Oh, Trump's going to do this. Trump's going to do that. I don't want to hear about inevitable. I don't even want to hear about imminent. I want to see what is happening now. Therefore, even if everything that was just said was true, let's wait till January. Let's see what actually happens. But to address the question more directly for this issue, I mean, Trump's got a lot on his plate, and I'm of the school that how do you tell a politician is lying? His lips are moving. So I take everything he or anybody says. Equal opportunity. I didn't believe anything Biden said either. I take it all with a grain of salt. But the preponderance of rhetoric coming from Trump, it seems pretty clear that he has certain priorities, and the immigration, the wall, the borders. That is clearly a top priority. And even if he didn't believe them, he's staked so much of his mandate on that. I think he has to follow through with that. So I expect that to be a high priority and, one of these day one things. And he got such huge support from the crypto crowd. We were just talking about Bitcoin. I think following through for... not to say paying off the bribes, but following through on campaign promises for this large and energetic and deep-pocketed, voter base, I think is definitely going to be high on his priority. So I'm looking at these things, and mucking about with the international trade on gold and silver, I just don't see that stacking up there. This doesn't seem like a day one kind of issue to me. Whacking China, sure. Whacking China is absolutely a day one issue. And that has implications for all kinds of things. More so on the industrial metals. But, the Chinese save in gold as well. And it's important. So I don't mean to dodge the question here, Andy, but I really think we need to see what Trump actually does. Those first 100 days, that honeymoon period, let's see what trends emerge from what he does. And the closest thing we have to that, before him being sworn in, is just looking at the appointments. But even that doesn't guarantee what the actual measures proposed will be. And sorry, the other thing on this too is, he's the art of the deal guy, right? So a lot of these tariffs, if you look at what he just talked about with China and Canada and Mexico, when he did that three-way thing, it really wasn't about trade. It was about fentanyl and the borders and stuff. Even the China thing. Like China, there's a legitimate trade issue there. But on that particular instance, what he talked about was fentanyl coming from China, as well as, it coming through the borders from Canada and Mexico. So that kind of tariff not being about trade is clearly a negotiation chip, right? And so if China and Mexico and Canada came back and said, oh, we'll do this and this and this to crack down on that, I could see Trump saying, okay, all right, maybe 5% or maybe no percent, but you better follow up or I'll put those tariffs on you. So it's just premature to say, oh, he's going to do this and that's going to happen. We don't know yet. And he's clearly negotiating with his counterparties. And if those negotiations happen, I mean, when he talked about that, Trudeau's on a plane the next day. So we may see motion happen here that walks some of these things, not walks them back. That's not the right phrase. Trump may achieve some of his goals even before he takes office, in which case he may not need to put these tariffs on, or he may do something else. bit messy here. I'm not sure I'm helping very much, Andy, but if I can help with one thing, I guess the takeaway here is, even if you believe 100% that Trump will do A, B, and C, it is dangerous to assume that A, B, and C will happen even before he gets into office. And also remember how razor thin that red, majority is in Congress. One kingmaker who digs his or her heels in can really scuttle, all kinds of legislative initiatives from the White House.
Now, what I take away from your answer is that you're a smart man, that most people would think about speculation as doing something, like you said, in a gambling mentality. I'm going to speculate on this and hope I get it right. What you're saying is speculation isn't gambling whatsoever. Speculation is knowing the facts and then taking a position. And I like that. I like that you could see both sides of the coin, but you want to see the hard data before you would actually invest your own money or recommend to others that they do the same. I also like, as a sidebar, that you post transparently your positions, everything that you're doing, and all of the data that surrounds your trades. You're showing everyone. You're not hiding anything in terms of your speculation, but you're not speculating until you have enough data to make it worthwhile. I like the answer, and I think if more
Sorry, Andy, let me just jump in with a quick correction. The public track record is all closed trades. So obviously my current portfolio, that's what clients of the independent speculator pay me for, and I can't give that away. That would be detrimental to the business and to their interests. But the track record it's completely transparent. You can see the screenshots from the brokerage, the order forms. You can see the fees, the dates, the number of shares. Everything is in there. And this is not a theoretical track record. This isn't like an index or some ideal thing. It's all completed trades. And, I don't win them all, but, the average is pretty good. And key point to gambling versus disciplined speculation, sorry to harp on this, but that this is relevant. The key point is, if you look at that track record, it's linked on the bottom of all our web pages. I have won more often than I have lost. Not all big wins. I'm not, swinging for the crazy bleachers all the time. But by being cautious, I'm a cautious speculator, crazy as that may sound. I'm a value speculator, crazy as that may sound.
No, actually, it's comforting for, I think, if you're seeking your advice, I find that to be the proper way to do it, especially in the light of your track record. Just a few more questions. Gold discovery in El Salvador, propaganda or substance?
Propaganda. Remember the trillions in Uganda and the billions in China. Oh, single deposit, $86 billion. And Saudi Arabia. And let's not forget, no smaller or lesser authority than the USGS estimated, I don't know how many trillions of dollars of minerals in Afghanistan. The most charitable thing I can say about these things is, if you look at the square meters of surface of a country and you say, okay, we have known incidents of copper or gold or lithium or whatever, X percent of the land. Well, apply that X percent over the whole country. Well, that means we have X trillions of dollars of lithium or copper or whatever it is. This is at best entirely theoretical. This is, it's like, never mind a fish story or the fish got away. It's kind of like there's this pond over there, you see, and it's probably got fish in it. Yeah. So, but this is important because you see these things come out and they put numbers on it and they say, $3 trillion worth of gold. Now that's the worth is my real problem here. If you said there's, if they were not ignorant, they could say gross metal value, right? They could say, hypothetically, this much gold exists and the price of this many ounces of gold is $3 trillion. But, of course, if it's 0.01 grams per ton, you're never mining that. It's actually worthless. It is completely worth nothing. It's like the giant golden asteroid thing. People talk about, $40 quintillion that it's worth or something. We don't even have the technology to access that, let alone to mine it, produce it, make something useful out of it. So the net present value of that asteroid, even if it was solid gold, which we don't even know that yet, it's it's hypothesized that it's a metal-rich asteroid. And yet this artist's conception of this solid hunk of metal made out of platinum and nickel and gold, it's everywhere. And people think like, that's what it looks like. This is the thing. And all we got to do is, grab it. Elon Musk will tow it back to Earth with a rocket and we'll all be billionaires. You can't make this stuff up. It's so ludicrous. And yet somehow, not just fly by night, some mom and pop website from some enthusiast, but mainstream journalists parrot this nonsense as though, it was written on stone tablets on Mount Sinai or something. So sorry, this is one of my pet peeves. I debunked this thing literally years ago, and every few months again, it pops back up again. It's just so silly. But anyway, so takeaways here are: one, don't panic. Anytime you see these claims, ask to see the drill core. And if they can't give you no drill core, it's worth zero. Even that, the drill core is the beginning. But, then we got to talk recoveries, metallurgy, before you can do a value calculation. So anytime you see worth in that headline and there's no math behind that, it is nonsense. It is silly. Just ignore that. The conspiracy theory angle would be, why is it that these headlines seem to crop up at times where gold is near all-time highs? Now, I'm not saying that I believe it's all orchestrated by somebody, but it is kind of funny how that happens.
Well, I don't want to, on this next question, this isn't as much a political, I guess it's somewhat. Look, I have been vocal in saying that the current administration, in my mind, has done as much or more to damage the country's reputation as any external foe ever could. So I want to read something to you in the vein of what you had just said about Afghanistan. And at the end of the question will be, could there possibly, not Afghanistan, in the Ukraine, would there be legitimate speculation possibilities? But let me read you the question, and I get your answer on both sides, whether it be in your disdain for what the question or the way that what this gentleman was saying, or if you want to sidestep that and just talk about speculation, if it's even feasible. I'll leave that up to you. But I was watching Sean Hannity the other night, and Lindsey Graham was on. And this was just a few nights ago. And Lindsey Graham, I paused it and I kept writing down everything he was saying. And so he told Sean Hannity that the war in the Ukraine is all about money, period. And he said that the Ukraine has a vast agricultural sector and $2 to $7 trillion worth of rare earth minerals. Again, to your point, 2 to 7, that's a big spread. He says that the war is all about money. People don't talk about it much, but the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is the Ukraine, $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals. Very relevant to the 21st century. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians, so it's in our interest to make sure Russia doesn't take over the place. Ukraine is also the breadbasket of the developing world. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes from Ukraine. So he goes on to say that the incoming Trump administration is uniquely positioned to cash out on such resources. Trump is going to do a deal to get our money back, to enrich ourselves with rare earths, a good deal for the Ukraine, and he's going to bring peace. And my initial thought is, well, geez, we give them over $200 billion without congressional oversight. We destroy their country, millions of their population dead. And that enriches the military-industrial complex. Then BlackRock builds back the country, has all the contracts, and then we take all of their natural resources. It's the kind of thing that I find very distasteful, and we don't need to comment on that if you don't want to. But is there legitimate, let's just pretend all of this is true, BlackRock's building back the country, the war is over, it's a year or two from now. Would there be legitimate speculation opportunities in a place like the Ukraine? Or is that something you wouldn't even go into or wouldn't even be possible?
Mostly no. And the nuance there is it's a big country. Of course, there's got to be some resources there. And if it was reestablished in a place where there was rule of law, it was a reasonable mining code, where investors could put the money in, and it's a lot of money to go explore, develop, build a mine. And they need to know that they're going to be able to have return on investment if they take all that risk and deliver. So that's a pretty tall order in a war-torn country. It's not something that happens right away. I mean, I get the contrarian idea, and sure, if Doug Casey had bought that castle in Zimbabwe during the war for $85,000 when it was offered to him, he could have had 10x his money. No, I think it's like 100 bagger or something. Like, it was on the market later for millions and millions of dollars. But it was a war zone. Like, even Doug Casey didn't buy that castle when there were shells falling on his head or, around him, or. So no, this is very silly. And I would dispute these things. I think this $2 to $3 trillion of rare earth, it's just like the USGS saying that Afghanistan had all these trillions of dollars of minerals. Sure, in a country that size, there's likely to be, but you know what? That's true everywhere. Rare earths is a misnomer. They're not rare. What's rare is, high concentrations of the stuff, but it's everywhere. There's another article out just recently. I saw it again. This is not new, but it's like suddenly people just discovered this old thing again of, guess what? There's a lot of rare earths in coal ash, like all this ash left over from these coal power plants for all these years. There's valuable rare earths in there. And if you could get it out economically, you could take that waste and turn it into something profitable. This has been known for I mean, this was not new when I was new in this business, and my beard's turned white since then. But as always, you see these breathless articles about how much something is worth, and they never mention the cost. Like, just anytime you see one of these articles that has the word worth in the title, just do a quick search, like Control F or whatever you have to do to search, and search for the word cost. And when I do that, I think it's not 9 times out of 10, it's probably 49 times out of 50, the word cost never appears in the article. Therefore, the word worth is meaningless. So no, I don't believe Lindsey Graham at all. Sure, there could be some there, but there's some everywhere. I think this is a case of Lindsey grabbing the public megaphone to try to plant some Trumpian ideas out there. He's giving Trump an argument that he thinks Trump would listen to. Like, if you tell Trump, oh, well, we need to save the Ukrainians because Russians are evil, that's not going to fly with Trump. Whereas if you tell him, oh, there's all these billions of or trillions of dollars worth of resources there, well, that's something that you would think the businessman Trump might consider. So I just see this all as political grandstanding and maneuvering. There's no, well, let me say, as a I'm not as much a veteran in this space. My hair's not turned white yet, as Rick and Doug, but I have never seen one shred of data. And I have been to Ukraine multiple times, by the way. I'm not armchair quarterbacking. I have been there. I have friends there. Thank goodness none of them have been killed. But there is no evidence at all to support that. Now, the breadbasket thing, that's well known. 50%, I don't know about that. So what I'm saying is, sure, there could be opportunity, but I would want to see the game board set properly first, with rule of law and all these kinds of things, proper banking systems, no missiles and shells falling on anybody's head before I'd even think about going there. And that's probably many years down the road. And that time, I would be personally, for personal reasons, I would love to invest in some mining endeavors in the Ukraine, but I'm not going to compromise my standards. I'm not just going to say, oh, well, there's an anomaly there, let's go build a mine, just because I want to help Ukraine or my Ukrainian friends.
Yeah, I would have rather him said this is all about the Ukrainian sovereignty and the freedom of these people rather than it's about money. I think it really cheapens the whole tragedy that it is. Anyways, moving on, and I appreciate your candor. What's the one piece of advice you'd wish you'd received when you first started? And I guess that's almost hard to even ask you because you were with such a legendary mentor, but what is that one piece of advice if you could talk to yourself back then on speculation and investing?
Well, this may not be, I'll two answers. Personally, for me, to answer the question, I was probably too arrogant. I'm not the smartest person I've ever met, but I also know that, I'm not the dumbest person I've ever met. Trying not to dislocate my shoulder, patting myself on the back here. And so I dived into, multiple spheres, the geology, the finance, even the math here, the geophysics, thinking that, I'm smart and I can figure this stuff out. And eventually I did, or I'm not a geologist still or a geophysicist, but figured out enough to be able to work with it and understand what I was seeing. But early on, I was too arrogant, and I made multiple mistakes, thinking I knew something or understood something when I really didn't. So the takeaway, if you're like me, the takeaway is don't be arrogant. If you're not like me, then that's not a problem, because you'll probably study it a lot more before trying to make a bet the way I did. But a takeaway though is that I'm not here to present anybody with some get rich quick scheme. Oh yeah, just follow this easy overlooked trick, like those internet advertisements. This weird trick, right, will make you millions, right? That's not me. I don't believe any of that nonsense. What I do requires hard work. I was Doug Casey's due diligence guy. Now I'm the due diligence guy directly of my clients. That's what I think of myself, as helping with the hard work of figuring this stuff out. And it's arrogant to think that you can just, read a few PowerPoints and visit a couple websites and sort the wheat from the chaff if you don't really, really know your stuff. But the more general takeaway, because not everybody shares my personality flaws, would be, I think the cardinal virtue of the successful speculator is skepticism. I mean, everybody's trying to sell you something. And no matter how nice the president is, and he sends you a pot of honey on your birthday and a nice card and how cute the IR girl is or whatever, these people are not your friends. They are trying to sell you something. You're a shareholder. You're on the opposite side of the table from them. Even if they own shares, their management, they work for you. They're not your friends. And you must be skeptical about everything they tell you. Every PowerPoint, every website, every press release, you need to read it, if not with an antagonistic or hostile mindset, then at least with a skeptical mindset. Ask yourselves, is this true? Why should I believe this is true? This may not by itself make you tons of money, but it will help you avoid huge losses. And as many legendary investors will tell you, you can come out ahead of the pack simply by avoiding the worst losses. Swinging for the bleachers can help if you do it right, but it could, but simply, not making the biggest mistakes makes you come out way ahead of the pack.
I used to read Richard Russell, God rest his soul, every day, and he would always say, avoid the big loss. You're fascinating. You've convinced me that your service is worth a really solid hard look. How can people, even myself, how can we find out more about your service, what you offer, and how to take advantage of it and become a speculator, a calculated speculator along with you?
Well, most people stop listening when you say that, but I'll say quickly before you go.
No, I mean it though.
I do think of the highest level of what I do, the most value of what I do. I think of it as being educational. When I circulate it to Doug Casey, David Galan, Rick Wool, and other of my mentors, a white paper describing the business I was going to launch, I put education as the highest level of service that I had to offer. And everybody told me, no, that's terrible marketing. People want education for free on the internet. You should call it research. So anyway, I do try to help. I really try hard to explain. I've got cheat sheets for readers, by the way, on the website. If you do a little search thing at the top right, look for cheat sheet. I have explanations for what is high grade, how to interpret feasibility studies, drill results, all kinds of helpful things like that. I do think this is important. Long story short, for your question, if you go to independentspeculator.com, you can sign up for their free weekly letter. It'll show you how I think. You can decide whether or not you like to hire me as your due diligence guy via my publications. But the one thing I can promise is that I won't spam you with a flood of daily advertisements. I hate that. You get one email per week. Check it out and see if it's for you.
Now, you don't actually place the trades, do you? You tell them which trades to place, or do you help facilitate the trades?
You mean the clients, the readers?
Yes.
No, I'm not a money manager. I would have to be fully regulated and Another of my fellow Puerto Ricans is Adrian Day. And I've heard him on the phone with his compliance officers, just like Adrian is, you've seen him, right?
Sure.
Calm,
Sure. He's always
respectable
calm and
British
quiet.
gentleman with his gold rimmed spectacles, right? But let's just say I've seen some heat build up under his collar dealing with these compliance people. Like he's got 3 people in the office and they have to have a meeting to discuss DEI, initiatives that they're going to, right? It's just so insane. Even if I could make more money doing that, actually, when I launched the business, Rick told me that the real money was in the money management business, even your 2 and 20, whatnot. But I look at these people, what they have to suffer. I mean, look at Rick. He's so happy now that he's retired, right? In his retirement, he's building a bank. Go figure. But he's not regulated anymore. He doesn't have to deal with the regulators. You know what? If I could 10x my money, but have to deal with what Adrian has to deal with, I wouldn't do it. I am perfectly happy being a peasant scum of the earth newsletter writer, where all I have to do is stand on the First Amendment and my right to share my financial opinions in publications to groups, not on an individual basis. So no, I do place my own trades, but that's for me. And the idea is to lead by example. I don't tell anybody what to do. I say, look, this is what I'm doing and you're welcome to follow me. And here are my results.
Well, I hope you get a whole bunch of people that check out your work after watching this video, and we'll post all of these links to the bottom. And I'm going to check it out a little bit more closely rather than just following you on Twitter and on YouTube. And there's always room for some calculated speculation in my portfolio.
Okay. If I can say one last thing, sorry, yes, but since you bring it up, let me just, because anybody who's thinking about this, I want to say something. There is a very different product. Like the independent speculator is like the international speculator I did for Doug, combined with the investment alert service and so on. But there's something very different. It's called My Take. There's no portfolio. It's really a database. It's got almost 1,000 companies under evaluation. I have a team now backing me up, and we constantly update this database. And so and the reason why I bring this up is, like, if you think you already know what you're doing, or you do know what you're doing and you have some success, maybe you don't need my portfolio. You've got your own. You're doing fine. My Take can help. My Take can be, even if you know what you're doing, it can be a second opinion. If you want to know what Lobo Tiggre, the due diligence guy, thinks of XYZ company, we cover literally hundreds of them, and we update our takes on them based on their latest developments. If any major news gets covered within a month, and everything else we cover on rotation. But this is different. I'm unaware of any other service like this out there. And so for the pros out there, for the people who think they know what they're doing, this is something to consider. And by the way, it's more affordable than the independent speculator.
Right on. Will I see you at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference?
You will. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that and Rick's are the only two I go to. I think they're the two finest. A little plug for Jay Martin and the VRIC. It's worth your time, people. Check it out. Lobo, I appreciate your candor very much. You're a gentleman. Thank you for coming on. I wish you and your family all the best in the holidays and a very, very happy and healthy 2025. And I will look forward to picking up with you where we left off, and look forward to catching up with you in person in January in Vancouver. But
yes, thank you very much. And very best to you and yours, dear audience.
Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.